How long, how long can it just keep getting better? Can we stay like this forever? I don't know. You tell me, Dua Lipa. That song's been on my repeat list today. And it's filling me with love, inspiration, and courage. Of which I thought I'd try to bring a little bit to a concept that I work with and come back to quite a lot in storytelling and design. And it also follows up on the little aside that we did about summarizing information that you find online so you can really quickly access things that were pivotal, meaningful, interesting to you. And we were talking about TED Talks, and I gave the example of Your Elusive Creative Genius. By Eat, Pray, Love, Grow. Wonderful, wonderful talk. I should go back and watch it. But I don't think that'd be quite as good as you going back and watching it, because I'm sure if I did, I could summarize it absolutely perfectly, but I don't want you to take away my thoughts of it. I want you to go there with an open heart and mind and make your own thoughts of it. In that way, sometimes I feel like having someone with incomplete homework that they can put on the table can be even more valuable in exactly what we were talking about building communities and bringing together ideas. Sometimes an unfinished idea is more valuable than a finished one because it has work to be done on it. And it encourages you to go in there and to add your own thoughts and perspective onto it, where if you put in some time and effort, to have a thing where like you could outdo me in your own unique way and bring something special to it. And that's an example that I want to be able to make. How long, how long, how long? It's so good. I didn't even know that Dua Lipa had like a voice that was like that powerful. I know that she had swagger and style and grace and, really good vocals. But the vocals in that song are insane. They're so good. I can't get enough. So we're going to come back and expand and elaborate on that, on what was another one of the most influential, pivotal TED Talks. I have 4 TED Talks that I tend to go back to when it comes to what was the inspiration for my platform and advocacy for free education for the world, for world collaboration, for crowdfunding new and awesome projects, to start to innovate on the things that you learn instead of just learning endlessly. Once you learn the foundations, to go in and experiment, to play, to add your unique imagination and intelligence to it, right? And the value of kids' voices in creating the new, in giving kids an empowered platform to express themselves and their ideas without having those ideas to have to be perfect, to be able to encourage the sparks of influence in the sparks of inspiration and influence in our kids' voices and ideas. And then you can give them the tools, the resources, the educational materials to make those sparks into something actionable. But to encourage just the dynamism, the spontaneity, the newness of the ideas of kids, and to think of that as this grand and flourishing source of inspiration and new ideas for solutions, where you don't have to have like everything mapped before you start going in and trying to dream and use your own voice to come up with ideas. I've got 4 TED Talks that I go for that, and I got 2 TED Talks that I go for, or for anyone who's in the creative fields. And I like to extend the creative field to something larger than just arts, design, music, ceremony, but something that's like community building, even something creative like analysis, right? Where you're breaking down and analyzing things in unique ways with unique language, bringing new ideas to it and analytical frameworks, and you can make discoveries. There's so much innovation you can do even there. Everything is a creative field when you bring your imagination into it. So I think of the creative fields as like arts and design, when I think it extends into almost everything. You could make an incredibly creative structure for a business, like a company or a restaurant or something. The guys that made the glasses, Warby Parker, you know, those guys that everyone gives an example of like quintessential mastery of entrepreneurship, where glasses and the design of glasses, something so, it's been around forever and ever and ever, and people don't think of that as a field that you can actively, massively innovate on. And they like made the coolest design for a business model, a structure, and the glasses they made are fucking awesome, and they made it into a multi-billion-dollar thing. Great. Okay, so the one is, your elusive creative genius. Fantastic, fantastic. Not only just in alleviating the pressure of creative accomplishment and following up creative accomplishment, but in putting yourself in a position where ideas can move through you. Big ideas, powerful ideas, world-changing ideas, without having to grasp them, without having to explain them, without having to put your name directly on them, but to be open to those ideas creates a foundation for those ideas happening for you. Just to think, okay, like the coolest, most awesome idea could come through you. If you didn't have the confidence to accept that idea, even if it was floating around in your head, you'd think, well, I'm just this guy. I can't have an idea that's that good. And it bounced right off. But if you're thinking, you might just be this guy, but putting yourself in this unique position and situation might allow you to be the channel of the guardian force, where a deity's worth of inspiration and energy could flow through you into the project that you're working on. Really, really good, right? The other idea equally as good, is like, I don't know exactly what it's called. We'll find out real quick. It's like the art of the remix or something. It was a classic TED Talk. Absolutely classic by this point. Embrace the remix. Nothing is original, says Kirby Ferguson. And it's really, really cool. The idea that we create new things, we have new ideas, and they should be original is really deconstructed in this talk. And it really lines up with everything that Feng Zhu says in the art of design. And everything that he does at the ground level, he's like 99% of design is a remix. You're taking other ideas that are tried and true and you're remixing things. But when you deconstruct it like that, he gives you the ability to remix things in a unique way, where yes, we're doing this framework that's very well and understood and grounded, but the things that you remix together and bring to the table of that structure can be like, instead of saying Star Wars, you deconstruct Star Wars into the mechanical shape design, some very old, some very modern, the design language that they use to put those things together in unique ways, having bold, flat surfaces with very little design, and then having some areas very technically sophisticated with all of these pipes and angles. So that mix of like bold flat space and some things very technically detailed, and then all these different pieces of the world of Star Wars, each of them looking their own different ways, making it this bold melting pot of design, is the quintessential example that everything has kind of based and modeled after, because fantastic. Even like the modern Dune movie, which is quite a very nice language of design. Elaborate and striking, simple in some ways, very complex in others. So, what's it fucking called? Everything's a remix. Embrace the remix. Embrace the remix. Really, really good. When you think of remixing something as not an element of design, but even as like the base element of design, if you want an original idea for a story, a good way to do that is to take two different stories and kind of combine them together and think of remixing one, and then thinking of the ways that you remix it. Where if you were to start from the ground level and kind of, I'm going to make this story, and you start inventing it all the way from the ground level, chances are it'll look pretty damn similar to all of these other things that did the same constructive steps that you're walking through, right? When if as the baseline you said it's like this thing, but then different in these ways, where the focus was much more on the ways that it would be different than trying to construct the thing from the ground level and reinventing the wheel, you're going to end up with the same wheel. But if you start with a wheel and then think, how can we remix and innovate on that wheel? Not only are you going to have a wheel, you're going to have a cool wheel that might be even better, right? When if you're like all the shapes for the wheel and does it work, you put in so much time and energy creating that same wheel, right? When if you're like, wheels are awesome, we understand wheels, we've already been there, let's remix it. Then you start to unlock something awesome, right? And this has almost always been in my design process. And at the top level, when it comes to scripting Hollywood movies, when it comes to creating a design language for a new game and a new world, when it comes to production design at the highest levels, this is the standard. Like, this is how it's done. And that is not to say that there is not a place for dynamic originality. Something like a Haruki Murakami story where every day he's out there dreaming and being intuitive and adding the dreams one on top of the next until you have a story that's like very, very original, or even like every single scene in this dynamic saga of a book. It doesn't follow a 3-act plot structure. It doesn't follow any kind of plot structure, but each scene is kind of just like true to itself in expressing the originality and the vision of that dream. And it's brilliant, you know? But if you're doing something in like production design, which is to say any part of entertainment, if you're making a manga story, it has to be manga interesting in all these expected ways if it's going to find an audience to make it successful enough to be as good as it could possibly be. So you want to be able to do those things at the expected and desired level for your audience. And then you can add in original ideas and explorations. Someone that does this really, really, really well is fucking Hideo Kojima, right? Who's able to make games at this world-class level. And then he's able to write in an incredibly original, like, philosophical treatise, right? That no one was really asking for when they bought the game. But after the game was done, they appreciated maybe more than anything, right? It's hard not to say that would be the puzzle solving, the amazing boss fights, the epic moments, setting up challenges where you have all of the pieces to figure it out, but they do not tell you how to solve that shit. And it might take you 5 minutes, it might take you 45 minutes cycling through every single item that you had until you found the key lock scenario. And it's going to be different for everyone, but when you figure it out yourself, you're rewarded, right? And it does all of those things that are expected of game design, that challenge and reward, the figuring things out, having, you know, active tactical puzzles, which is what I call the boss fights of the game. Because obviously it's kind of a puzzle in the way that they're like, dodge those attacks and then strike in the openings. And even when you get that, when you're fighting the Hind D helicopter fight, and it's like going around and you're like fighting with missiles, you're like, okay. It swings in, and after he shoots, you know, like those areas are covered. Surprisingly difficult to finesse those openings at the right level, right? And to this day, it is technically difficult, which shows a real mastery of design and the love of design. Yeah, no, if it comes to cool Hideo stories, the first game that he ever made was not Metal Gear. It was a game about a penguin like sliding around and getting these things, but he was immersed in how code created these experiences. He deep dove into that through the Silly Penguin game, but the way that you could change it, and every single piece of the puzzle mattered. And there were so many moving pieces that happened behind the scene like clockwork to make the simple functionality of design effective, right? Where you have an image in your mind, and then there's so many working pieces that influence it. And he internalized how to code a game at the base level, you know, in the MSX like 8-bit era, the start of the revolution of games. Hideo was there and had all of these dreams, and while it was still such a creative aspect, you know, there wasn't all of these genres and ways that video games are expected to be. Everyone who was making video games was making new types of video games. So he had all these dreams of his favorite movies and stories and things that were personally meaningful to him, and started thinking of how you could possibly write that into the engine of game design, which, you know, his personal story ended up creating a framework that was so massively innovative. Everything that he did was changing and building new things and remixing so many old things. Even in like, you know, so many of the ideas in Metal Gear Solid are kind of just like not copy pasted, but they're taken, they're attributed, they're elaborated from these different movies and games and stuff, but fitted to the engine of game design, right? Stuff where even like Snake's name, his character, his appearance, like Clint Eastwood and Snake Plissken from the Escape from New York series. There's so many things that were like just kind of taken from this other place, but in the light of Metal Gear Solid as a unique world, mythology, and game, yeah, it became new. You know, it's not because they made something completely original from the ground level, but remixed two things together that had never been combined in that way. So when you start using fusion, one of your base elements of storytelling and design, you can come up with a story that's personally interesting for you. Even if you're like, there's one scene or a character dynamic from this story that really just captured my heart. What about a different setting for the same character dynamic and story? And there's a little bit of a gap between those things. When you start writing in the gap, you kind of find your world, you find your character, you bring in things from all these different places within your vast ecosystem of design, your own visual library and your narrative library of things that were emotionally resonant to you. And when you can bring the emotional resonance into it, the story starts to breathe life. You know, if those are character dynamics, moments, worlds that captured your sense of wonder, your imagination, your moments, there was something that was peak about them. And you didn't even have to ask yourself if it was peak, because when you saw it and you felt it, you knew it was peak, right? Because there's a resonance, there's something in you that understood and comprehended all the different pieces and how they were coming together, and like your expectation and the way that even like subverted your expectation, and that like it jumped further or it went left or there was a twist or something that you didn't see coming, but you just understand it so much and you've invested yourself in the story so much where you're living all of these character dynamics. They're not like static anymore. And so when the twist happens, you feel it in every bit of your body and soul. There's different, like, books do this very well, so do shows and games and comics, very, very much so. But it's something that taps into almost all layers of our ecosystem of design and storytelling. That is to say, trying to capture great moments that become emotionally resonant with the audience because of the investment that they've built into the world and the characters. They understand them, they love them, and cherish them. And that's where you get that huge drop of emotion, that physically physically resonant appreciation. Where if you start thinking of a story, you'll get a little bit more adrenaline, serotonin. If you think of one of those moments, it'll give you spine tingles. It physically changes your body chemistry because it's that impactful on you. And when you get that, you're onto something. You really do. So thinking about the art of the remix, if you're a storyteller or a designer, take something that you already love or something that you think could be expanded upon in a unique way. I was just trying to write a story that used the dynamic of Kenpachi in Bleach, like beating his old mentor in this emotionally charged fight. Because there's a part of himself he was holding back, and they started as like duelists that fought each other, and she was the only one that pushed him to that edge. So he had made it a point not to cross over this edge, and if they were going to face this new threat, they needed him over the edge. So it's this like wild character dynamic of how much they love each other, and he's got to cut her down, and like the catharsis of him in that moment as this like wild beast character. But then there's a lot of emotion behind that. There's something really sweet and touching and caring, and those different worlds of him as this like homicidal fucking killing machine, and the sweetness of that bond is like really cool, really one of a kind, really unique and untouchable. And I've only seen that in Bleach. When you see something where you're like, that's really, really, really cool. What if that was like the core character dynamic of the main character in this mythology that sets up how they get their main abilities to take on the whole rest of the story? And it'd be so dynamic and impactful enough. You know, it'd set a really high, crazy emotional bar for like what the rest of the story and the world is going to be like. You know, you get a guy who's definitely just been post-traumatized by what happened. And it's something that's like shocking and horrific and, you know, deeply personal enough. Your mentor that kind of raised you and always is there is now gone. There's kind of like, it gives the character a huge amount of sovereignty, right? Like now they're walking with both lives and they're into the world. So really, really cool. Thinking that of a main character dynamic for a story. For someone that then goes on to explore all these mysteries of this world you don't know. Yeah, writing interesting plot points into it from that point, but they've like been through the shit already. And that'd be cool. You know, when you're writing situations where they've got a lot of strength, I like something where you can kind of see where that strength comes from. You set it up in a way where the audience goes, oh no, that makes sense. Then almost like, yeah, I get that. And you should have that. You shouldn't have to, I don't know, like over explain something. If you've set up all the dynamics of it, people should be like, yeah, I get that. I love that. If you just start to remix scenes instead of thinking of just like starting with a blank canvas, and like that's very intimidating. But if you start with something as your like it's like that, and then different in these ways, changed up in these ways, this added on to it, you've got a huge amount of material in front of you. You can start to adjust and turn and tweak and look at from different angles. And that's always a fun place of design, and has been for a long time. When I listen to their talk, Embrace the Remix. And this is also about innovating on things. If you don't think that you start with a blank canvas, but you can copy paste anything into that canvas and then change it. When, like, I think if instead of starting with nothing and trying to build up a thing, if you start with a thing and then change it in all of these ways, it will be more original. It'll be more effective, more impactful, while still keeping space for the other, always. Like, there's magic in the other way as well, if you want to be Haruki Murakami about it. But even people like Stephen King or Haruki Murakami are influenced by all of these different things, be they films and music and stories, and they add things in that have been emotionally resonant and impactful to them while they explore these ideas and characters and stories and let them surprise them. So it's definitely both sides, and you give yourself that creative freedom. But if you start with love and appreciation, that is a powerful creative emotion. You know, if you start with the stories and characters that you love and breaking into why and how you love them, and to expand on that and bring your own imagination and personal touch into it, then baby, you're working with something that's pure magic. Yeah? All right. I'm going to leave it there just for now, and we'll come back with more on storytelling and design, and then maybe some ideas in storytelling and design, which I love, where we can talk about these things, analyze these things, but then start to work them into new compositions together, and compositions that become a foundation for collaboration, where you're thinking, this is a really cool idea for a world and characters and story, but to have space that you can have other designers that make those characters their own as well. You have voice actors that bring the emotion to life and add in their own take. And everyone's takes comes together to make a world more dynamic and rich than you could ever make on your own. I'll leave it at that. I'm sending you my love and light to infinity.